Make friends easily. How to charm and connect in record time. Written by Patrick King, narrated by Russell Newton. Loneliness is an epidemic. More than half of Americans report that they feel lonely, and despite living in one of the world's densest cities, 55% of London residents say they feel isolated, and 62% of young Australian adults report the same. With the fallout from COVID lockdowns all over the world, it's no surprise that millions of people in the world now claim they have no friends and that socializing is harder than ever before. Do you feel the same? This book is for you if you'd like to connect more with others and connect more authentically, make new friends, improve the friendships you already have, become more comfortable and confident in social situations, become a better conversationalist, get out of your comfort zone, become a dazzling, ultra-charming social butterfly. Well, that last one may be an exaggeration. Nevertheless, the hope is that by the end of this book, you'll see that becoming a charming, likable, and confident social butterfly is not as unachievable as you might first think. Let's be honest. Our world is becoming a strange, fractured place with an increasing sense of division between people. Life is busy. Even those of us who consider ourselves friendly extroverts may find that certain periods in life pose challenges to building a healthy support network. With the rise in certain technologies and lifestyles, you could be forgiven for thinking that the art of conversation and friendship making is in massive decline. But all is not lost. Making friends is not some mysterious dark art, but something that anyone, yes, even you, can learn to do, no matter where you're starting from. In the chapters that follow, we'll be looking at how people become friends in the first place and how to engineer those circumstances yourself. We'll consider ways to create your own personal aura of confidence and likability using simple techniques you can practice immediately. We'll explore how to ask questions, listen actively, tell stories, create witty banter, and reveal more about yourself in just the right way and at the right time. You'll learn more about why previous friendship-making efforts may have failed and how to make sure you're removing any future obstacles to real connection so you can build rapport with others quickly and reliably. One caveat, however, there won't be any of the old conventional advice in these pages like suggestions to join a meetup group or try to find the love of your life at a community pottery class. The truth is, your life circumstances are completely unique to you, and no book could ever claim to tell you exactly where to meet your future friends or what they'll look like. Most of us already know the standard advice to join an interest group, get involved in your community, sign up to volunteer, or join a church, parents group, singles club, or the like. This is good advice, and it works best when you actually do it. But for many of us, meeting people is just the first step. It's what happens next that's difficult, right? That's where this book comes in. The principles and techniques discussed here will help you take those first crucial moments of meeting someone new and nurture them so that you gradually work your way up to being closer friends, one great conversation at a time. Please, don't let reading this book be the only thing you do. Learning new techniques and approaches is a necessary but not sufficient condition for making real change in your life. And none of it will make much of a difference unless you have the magic ingredient, action. The ideas discussed in these pages are not meant to be interesting intellectual musings, but prompts to get out there and literally try something new. How do these concepts look when applied to your unique life circumstances? There's only one way to find out. Real experience in the world is what creates change, That's why at the end of each section, you'll be encouraged to get out there and experiment. Some of the material and exercises will seem really obvious to you until you try them for yourself. The magic happens in the consistent application and practice of an idea, not in how well you can grasp it intellectually. Who are you going to practice on? If you're socially anxious or shy, or have difficulty with people, relax. You don't need to make quantum leaps overnight. Wherever you are, just start there. If needed, you can always make short, brief connections with shop assistants, people standing in lines, random acquaintances. Take a look at your social circle and identify the people in the periphery. You only need the smallest of connections to build on, and small connections are everywhere. All you need is an open mind, the willingness to step out a little of your comfort zone, and some genuine curiosity of the world and the people who live in it. We're all different, and we all have our own obstacles and blind spots, but remember that human beings are built for connection. You know more than you think you do. The friendship formula. Haley remembers her best friend from first grade, Kitty. The two first met when they were seated next to one another in homeroom, and they spent every weekday together at school. And soon every weekend, too. They'd talk for hours or just do homework together in silence, or walk home together from after-school activities. Haley remembers how her friend had been like a lifeline to her. She had just moved to the neighborhood, her parents had just gotten a divorce, and everything in life was upside down. Except Kitty. With her, she could talk about anything. In fact, the two became so close that they considered themselves inseparable, better than sisters, and swore they'd be best friends forever. Kitty is still in Haley's life, although they now live on opposite ends of the world. Haley is now 34, and discovering that making friends as an adult is different. Haley considers herself a kind, friendly person who makes an effort to meet new people. She doesn't understand why, years after moving to a new area, she doesn't feel like she really knows anybody. A woman she really wanted to be friends with, Alex, is the wife of someone she met in painting class. Though Haley felt like they'd made a connection, Alex just seemed to drift off, their text messages becoming strained, and nothing really took off. Haley's world, in fact, seems full of awkward meetups, promising connections that quickly fizzle, and friendships that revolve around drinks every 4 months. Soon, Haley is sick of hearing the phrases, "so busy," and "sure, let's get a coffee or something." Why was it so easy to make such a strong connection in first grade, and why is it so difficult now? Dr. Jack Schafer, former FBI agent and author of The Like Switch, has a theory that might have the answer. Schafer is a behavioral expert who first introduced the concept of the friendship formula. According to him, clicking with a person and becoming their friend is not some random bit of magic, but follows a predictable pattern. The formula goes like this. Friendship equals proximity plus frequency plus duration plus intensity. In other words, friendship will develop most quickly and most firmly when all 4 factors are strongly present. Without them, friendship cannot emerge. Let's take a look at each in turn and see how they apply to Haley's friendships. Proximity. This is the distance between you and the other person. When you think about it, building friendships is simply a matter of fostering increasing closeness. And that closeness is not just metaphorical. The closer you are physically, and the more context you share, the better your chances of striking up a friendship. Haley and Kitty sat right next to each other for hours every day for all of first grade. That's a lot of time. Compare that with her friend of a friend, Alex, who she'll only see if she makes a concerted effort to arrange a meetup. The psychology of this is straightforward. Human beings tend to like what they are already familiar with. If you're spending a lot of time with someone, they become familiar to you. Sure, constantly being in someone's space doesn't necessarily mean they will like you. Siblings all across the world can attest to this, but it does mean that you will increase your exposure to that person. And if there is a potential for friendship, all that exposure will help you make something of that potential. Alex and Haley, on the other hand, are simply not in each other's world. They each have completely separate, different lives, and to find room in that life for someone else takes an active effort, an effort that people are sadly not too ready to make. Frequency. You can probably already see how Kitty and Haley's friendship was based on greater frequency than most adult friendships are. Greater frequency means a stronger chance of a friendship developing. Even if you can't spend a lot of time with someone, it's still worth something to frequently spend time with them. Consider a long-distance marriage, where the couple spends only 1 day a month together. Now consider a different long-distance couple who only spends 12 days in a year together all at once. Which couple do you imagine has the greater chance of staying connected? Both spend the same amount of time with one another, but the latter couple has more frequent contact, and this naturally leads to a stronger sense of bonding. It comes back to repetition and familiarity. The more frequently you engage with someone, the more they feel like part of your world. There are simply a greater number of opportunities to share, to communicate, to become part of one another's experience. You might wave hello and say 1 or 2 sentences to your neighbor every single day for years, and genuinely come to think of them as a kind of friend. One day you might meet a person and have a deep and meaningful conversation with them for hours, but never see them again. The connection with this latter person is definitely deeper and more satisfying, but you probably don't consider them a friend. Duration. As we've seen, friendships can be formed in short, frequent bursts, but all the better if they have the luxury of time on their side. If you add up the total time that Haley and Kitty spent together, it probably borders on tens of thousands of hours. If you add up the total time Haley and Alex spent together, it's probably around 30 minutes. Even though Haley and Kitty were joined at the hip, even they weren't that interested in one another after only 30 minutes. Friendship takes time to build. You're probably wondering if this is a catch-22 situation. People only spend time with those they're already friends with, but how can you make friends with someone until you spent a lot of time with them? It's true that adult friendships are plagued by this very problem, but understanding this snag means you're best positioned to get around it as quickly as possible, which is exactly what we'll be doing through the rest of the book. Intensity. The final variable in the equation is how well you are able to satisfy another person's needs during any social interaction. The more you can, the better the chance of striking up a friendship. Siblings are a great example of how even people with high duration, frequency, and proximity in their interactions don't necessarily become friends. They may not meet one another's emotional needs. In fact, they may actively get in the way of them. Siblings who get on well, on the other hand, often do so because they have a connection based on mutual support through a shared challenge, or else they've come to help one another with their respective needs, i.e., they have intensity. Haley and Kitty found a safe haven with one another. They had long, intense talks about their secret feelings and helped one another through the tough times. Compare that to Haley and Alex. Both are independent, self-sufficient adults with husbands, children, and fulfilling jobs. Their lives are full. To put it bluntly, the mutual emotional need for that connection is simply not as strong. Incidentally, flagging intensity is a big reason for the failure of already established friendships and relationships. It's the reason a couple complain of lack of connection when they spend every day together. Because when they are together, they're both distracted, staring at their phones, or occupied with low-level chit-chat. As they lose intensity, they lose connection. To return to the equation, you can see that friendships will develop according to the sum of all these four elements. That means that one element can be relatively weak if another compensates by being extra strong. Consider these examples. Two colleagues work together and happen to spend a lot of time doing the same hobby, too. There's not much intensity, but they make up for it with plenty of proximity, duration, and frequency, and consider one another good friends. Two old college friends have long since moved to different countries and now only see one another yearly for a long Christmas vacation together. They spend a full 2 weeks together catching up. They lack proximity and frequency, but they have plenty of intensity and spend hours together, just all at one time. This has kept their friendship going for decades. Two people live on the same block, and over time have come to an arrangement. They collect one another's packages if they're out, and they pass on messages or check in on the houseplants if the other one goes away for a few days. Despite being two completely different people who move in different circles, they've become friends. They have very low duration. They've seldom chatted for longer than 5 minutes at a time, but high intensity and frequency, since they regularly meet one another's needs. Though all sorts of combinations can and do come together to make a friendship, naturally there are lower limits, and if the total package comes below a certain threshold, a friendship simply cannot develop. This is what happened with Haley and Alex. They have low proximity, low duration, low intensity, and low frequency. Haley thinks, "I don't understand. We got on so well together, and we both really wanted to get to know each other better." But Dr. Schafer would say that friendship has very little to do with how much people like one another or how similar they are. He might point out, in fact, that many good friendships can form even if people are quite different or annoy each other sometimes or come from wildly different backgrounds. You can probably prove this to yourself by thinking back to your own childhood friends. How many of them were genuinely great matches for you as a person? And how many simply took root in your life because they were there, they were familiar, and you both went through the same experiences together? How to use Schafer's formula to your benefit. Many people who struggle to make friends start out by asking the wrong questions. How can I be more likable? What's wrong with me? Am I not interesting or funny or smart enough? Why don't they like me? Instead, take Schafer's advice and deliberately find ways to increase proximity and the duration, intensity, and frequency of your interactions with people. Here's how. 1. Start by increasing proximity. Your goal is just to get them comfortable with you being around so that you start to feel more and more familiar. The big caveat here is to do this slowly. If you push yourself on people, they'll perceive you as a threat. 2. Once proximity is established, gradually increase the amount of time you spend with that person. At the same time, slowly increase frequency too. 3. Only after you've done the above can you start ramping up the intensity by talking about more in-depth things or revealing a little more about yourself. 4. If the intensity part goes well, the cycle should repeat, with both of you seeking out more proximity. Over time, a friendship is established, and the same 4 factors help to maintain it over time. Granted, this seems like a pretty easy process, and it is. It can take time, however, and the biggest reason for failure along the way is impatience. Imagine you meet someone interesting at a party, and you immediately click and start talking. Even though it's the first time you've ever met, you soon notice yourself sharing personal details, ranting about politics and other heavy topics, and probing them for answers to all life's deep and meaningful questions. Now, whether the other person reciprocates or not, you may find that after the conversation is over, a sudden awkwardness sets in. By skipping the parts where you build proximity, frequency, and duration, you risk going too far too soon. If you've ever formed an intense connection with an instant friend who then disappears after a month of knowing you, this might be the reason why. On the other hand, it's not enough to only increase proximity and so on. The old advice to find friends at shared interest groups or hobbies is good advice, but it's just a starting point. If you are regularly spending hours every week with people, but you never increase intensity or ask them to hang out outside of those scheduled times, chances are the friendship won't properly launch. In the remaining chapters of this book, we'll be looking at plenty of different techniques for better listening, asking questions, telling a great story, and building rapport. But all these techniques are best when embedded in a firm understanding of this overall timeline of a developing friendship. Even the wittiest of banter and charming conversation won't help if you're only at the first stage of gently increasing proximity with a potential new friend. The rule is, go slow. Take your time and build up each successive interaction on the previous one. Put it into practice. Look around your social network and identify one person who is an acquaintance, i.e., someone you know but don't know very well. How often do you spend time with this person, and for how long? Do you meet one another's needs in any way? Once you've quickly appraised the current status of the relationship, decide on what you need to do next in order to create more closeness. You will probably need to increase proximity or frequency first. How could you do that? This is not necessarily about inviting them out somewhere or conspicuously asking them to be your friend. Although if this feels right to you, you can do this. Instead, become curious about how you might start gently building value in one of the 4 variables. You don't need to commit to a lifelong relationship either. Just take action and see what happens. Create your own reality distortion field. Right now, try to think about the people you've been drawn to in your life, perhaps even attracted to. Think about how you first perceived them and what made you single them out in a world filled with other people. Why did you decide you liked them especially and wanted to know them better, even when they were still relative strangers? Best-selling author and self-help guru Tim Ferriss claims that certain people in the public eye have what he calls a reality distortion field. Sounds impressive, huh? In less flashy language, he's referring to none other than that irresistible combination of charm, charisma, confidence, and ability to persuade. In other words, that quality that makes other people flock around you and want to be your friend. Luckily, says Ferriss, this quality is not 100% innate, but something you can develop and cultivate. In fact, when it's all broken down, the skill of charming people is made of astonishingly simple parts. Make brief eye contact. Most people tend to go about their daily business with only cursory glances at the world around them. other people included. But brief eye contact with strangers is simultaneously the easiest and most powerful way to quickly convey connection, confidence, and a little sprinkle of charm. It's simple. For less than a second, glance into the eyes of people you walk past, then look away again. That's it. The key is to keep it as brief as possible. The fact is, people, even complete strangers, will not mind or see it as an intrusion. But with that flicker of eye contact, you actually create a strong sense of presence that most other people are probably not creating. While you make eye contact, keep your gaze soft and neutral. You don't want to be staring at someone or making them think that you're looking for something, trying to flirt, or making a point of any kind. If this trick seems too simple to actually work, then try it for yourself. The next time you're out in public, challenge yourself to make fleeting eye contact with 5 or 10 people in this way. Then notice not only how you feel, but how others respond to you. Prepare to be surprised. Be very aware of personal space. Charismatic, confident people have a way of being very physically present without it feeling imposing or threatening. It's all about proximity again. Closeness is not just a physical feeling, but a function of many subtle psychological experiences. There's a reason they call it eye contact. For example, looking at someone psychologically brings you closer to them, even if the space between you remains the same. There are other ways to create this perception of closeness without literally getting in someone's face. For example, you could face them head-on, use touch sparingly, raise or project your voice, or talk to or even about them. You can imagine that if someone enters a room, makes eye contact, greets you at a fairly loud volume, and then comes over, gently touching your elbow as they shake your hand, you'd feel they were extremely present without impinging on your personal space. It's this conscious use of physical proximity that allows charismatic people to command attention while staying friendly and respectful. Ferris claims that Bill Clinton was such a man. A friend of Ferris's claimed to dislike Clinton, but by chance got to meet him at a party one day. Ferris explains, "In that moment, face to face, all of my friends' personal animosity toward Clinton disappeared in one instant. As they were shaking hands, Clinton made eye contact with my friend in a way so powerful and intimate, my friend felt as though the two of them were the only people in the room." Two things are fascinating about this. The first is that charisma is so powerful, it can completely remove and reverse any active biases a person may have. And the second is that all of this can be done with small, simple tools. Just eye contact and a handshake. Stay present. It sounds kind of obvious, but if you want presence, you need to actually be present. That means that you cannot be distracted by your own anxieties about socializing. You cannot be thinking about what you're going to say next. And you can't be quietly judging the other person or worrying that they're judging you. The moment you go off in your own head and abandon the real, unfolding moment right in front of you, you lose some of your raw power and potential magnetism. You're elsewhere, and other people can feel it. We all know what it's like to talk to a person who is only half listening, looking past us, or distracted by a nearby screen. But it's worth remembering that you can make others feel invisible or unheard, even without being this obvious. It's possible for somebody to be looking right at you and yet not really see you. And it's possible for someone to say, "Uh-huh," and repeat what you just said, even though you know deep down that they haven't really heard you. Sadly, in today's information-soaked world, we're all in something of an attention deficit. The good news is that by pausing, by being present, and by actually paying total attention to the person in front of you, you will instantly stand out from the crowd and elevate that interaction to something special. It is one small way that we can build the intensity we spoke about in the previous chapter. The simple reason is that eye contact fulfills a very primal and real need in every human, the need to be acknowledged. Consider again what Ferris's friend said about Clinton, that he made it feel like they were the only people in the room. What this tells us is that Clinton's eye contact made people feel important. They were not there in a crowd clamoring for attention. They were seen and heard. The person looking at them treated them as though they were genuinely interesting. What could be more magnetic than that? Here's another example. In a now famous 1977 interview Barbara Walters did with Dolly Parton, we can see all three of the above play out beautifully. It's worth watching a clip of this interview if you can, simply because it's a perfect master class in what a reality distortion field actually is and just how powerful it can be when done right. What's fantastic about the interview is that it also dispels the myths many of us have about what charm looks like. Look at any win friends and influence people style material, and you could be forgiven for thinking that charisma is something reserved for businessmen in power suits in the 80s. You could come to the conclusion that presence and gravitas were about domination, power, and crushing your opponent. However, Dolly Parton proves that this has nothing to do with it. In the interview, Barbara Walters is pretty obviously going for the kill and posing questions deliberately designed to throw Dolly off, embarrass her, or get her flustered. But watch how Dolly reacts. She does a few key things. She is perfectly, almost serenely calm in herself. She doesn't rush, she isn't tense, and she doesn't, for a second, behave as though she doesn't have the right to speak freely. She is self-assured, calm, composed. She maintains deep, sincere, and frequent eye contact with Walters, even as the questions are obviously hostile. Dolly knows exactly what is going on, but doesn't descend to that level. She smiles, she's amiable, and she consistently pulls the conversation in the direction she wants it to go, never taking any bait or reacting. She responds to intrusive and insulting questions in a thoughtful, mature way that consistently elevates the conversation to where she wants it to be. She doesn't get angry or defensive. She maintains her frame in the way she wants it, and sweetly, easily dismisses Walter's attempts to create drama or tension. She is fully 100% present in the interview, in herself and in her body. She leans forward and listens closely to Walters. She takes up space. In fact, a big part of Dolly Parton's legendary charisma comes from this ability to expand so visibly into her surroundings. Her body is big. Her smile is big. Her hair is big. She makes no apologies and simply, comfortably takes up this space for herself. The message is communicated on a primal level. I'm here. I'm in the present. I'm comfortable. Note, however, that this is a quiet but firm resolve rather than arrogance, pushiness, or aggression. Dolly Parton won hearts and minds precisely because she could control situations in this way. She looked like a blonde bimbo. Walters even insultingly asks whether she's a hillbilly. But that's only to the untrained eye that cannot see the social genius of working with eye contact, presence, body language, and energy. Barbara Walters, a skilled and experienced broadcast journalist, is left looking petty and transparent because she lacks the charisma that Dolly has in abundance. When Barbara takes a snipe at Dolly's outrageous fashion sense, insinuating that she doesn't have to look like that, in a condescending tone, Dolly answers, not with her words, but with her demeanor. She laughs and replies with a charming, totally relaxed smile that, no, she doesn't have to dress as she does, but chooses to because she wants to. I would never stoop so low to be fashionable. That's the easiest thing in the world to do. In this way, she communicates beautifully that she doesn't play the games Barbara does, and that she is way above being provoked using so trivial a tactic. Not only does she put Walters in her place, she actually manages to do it with kindness, civility, and a degree of grace that is far more than the rudeness of the interview desired. Barbara went into the interview with the intention to show up Parton as a ditz and an airhead. Parton saw it all coming and disarmed it to perfection. When you watch the recording of the interview, you realize Parton achieves all this with nothing more than her physical presence, her eye contact, and the way she carries herself. That's all. She doesn't have any wit or clever clapbacks. She doesn't attack or get angry. She certainly doesn't make intelligent arguments. She conquers the interaction solely because she is in perfect, total control of herself. And her reality distortion field blows everything out of the water. Can you learn to do this for yourself? Absolutely. But take a page from Dolly's book and realize that the biggest impact you make on people does not come from what you say, it's from how you are. In the interview, Dolly said, "Oh, I know they make fun of me, but all these years, the people have thought the joke was on me, but it's actually on them. I'm sure of myself as a person. I'm sure of my talent. I'm sure of my love for life and that sort of thing. I'm very content. I like the kind of person that I am, so I can afford to piddle around and do-diddle around with makeup and clothes and stuff, because I am secure with myself." Put it into practice. The next time you're interacting with someone, try to hold the frame of yourself as secure, worthy, and perfectly calm in yourself. If you like, you can temporarily imagine that you are someone else that you admire, and then behave as you imagined they would behave. What would you say, do, and think if you knew deep down that you had intrinsic worth, and so did everyone else? How might that change the way you approach every interaction? Note how your mindset instantly alters the way you hold other people's gazes, how you take up space, how you move. Notice what it does to the reality around you. Is there anything you'd like to keep on doing? Reciprocal curiosity. Picture this. You're at a party and get to chatting with a person you don't know, and they seem interesting. They ask what you're up to at the moment, what you do for work, and so on. You answer them, but each question and answer seem to go a little like this. I'm ready to start growing the business at this point, but I'm kind of not sure exactly what that will look like, so it's like being in limbo. I know there needs to be a next step, but I haven't quite figured it out yet. Them. Sure. Tell me about it. I know how that goes. You're just scared. I went through the same thing last year. Then, later, my wife and I seldom come to these things, but we had a free weekend, so we decided we'd... Them interrupting. Oh, totally, yeah. You decided you'd give it a shot. That's cool. You have to force yourself to get out there. And then again, man, My back's been killing me, though. Well, let me give you the number of my chiropractor. He's the best, hands down. Now, looking at the above, you wouldn't say there's anything wrong with these interactions, right? And yet somehow you leave the conversation feeling a mixture of boredom and irritation. The other person was polite, and you talked well enough, so why did something feel so off? The reason may be a simple one. They lacked curiosity. If you go back and read the interactions again, you'll see that the other person has an attitude of already knowing who you are and what you're saying. To put it bluntly, they're not really interested. They do not view the interaction as a possible way to learn something new or encounter something they aren't already familiar with. They don't ask any questions or listen to the answers because, on some level, they don't believe that you as a person have anything new or interesting or valuable to give them. Sounds extreme, but imagine having another conversation later on at the same party and saying all the same things again, except it goes like this. I'm ready to start growing the business at this point, but I'm kind of not sure exactly what that will look like, so it's like being in limbo. I know there needs to be a next step, but I haven't quite figured it out yet. So, you're basically an independent publisher? Have I got that right? Or, my wife and I seldom come to these things, but we had a free weekend, so we decided we'd take a look, try something new. Oh yeah, sounds great. Who was playing the last time you were here? This is my first time, so I have no clue what to expect. And then, man, my back's been killing me, though. Oh, no. Don't tell me. You've got back pain, too? Do you think we're all getting old or something? You're the third person to tell me about back pain this week. Bearing in mind the idea of curiosity, can you see the difference between the first person's approach and the second person's? Social skill experts often tell people to ask more questions, but it's worth understanding why they give this advice so often. The fact is that the best conversations are real, spontaneous, respectful ones. They're conversations in which we are fully present, open-minded, and receptive to whatever thing we might learn about the fascinating person in front of us. Questions are good because they keep us curious, and curiosity is the secret sauce. The worst conversations are those where we're not really paying attention, where we make assumptions that we don't bother to confirm the truth of, where we judge the other person or simply go through the motions, rather than have a living, breathing conversation in the present moment. Curiosity makes all the difference. It's the lifeblood of a genuine, authentic interaction. You can spend your whole life talking to people, being polite, being interesting, etc. But if you're genuinely not curious about them, or about the potential for your interaction as it unfolds in that moment, then your interactions will always feel a little small, hollow, and flat. Be honest with yourself. Do you find people interesting? Do you genuinely enjoy learning about them and having them show you their unique new ways of looking at the world? Do you let them change your mind or steer the conversation in the ways only they can? Do you like them? Do they inspire or comfort or teach or entertain you? Do you leave interactions feeling honored that you got to peek into their special world for a brief moment? If truth be told, most of us are more interested in convincing others how fascinating we are than finding what is truly fascinating about them. But think about the last time you really enjoyed someone's company. Did you enjoy them because they said all the right things and were clever and impressive? Or did it simply feel good to roll with the moment as it came, learn something new, and uncover something unexpected, something real. A good conversation is a thing of beauty, and it's about reciprocal curiosity. When the first person at the party says, "Oh, sure, tell me about it. I know how that goes. You're just scared. I went through the same thing last year." What they're doing is making sure that you think they are interesting. They want you to know that they're smart and experienced and know what you're talking about. They've seen it all before and have all the answers. They're clever. This is an understandable human impulse, but it misses the fact that it doesn't feel good from the other person's perspective. To them, it sounds like, "You're nothing special or interesting. I'm not really that interested in hearing about you. You're not unique. Your situation doesn't really grab me or warrant any further investigation." When you say, "You're just scared," you're closing the potential of the conversation down. You don't care to learn more about the other person because you think that you already know what they're going to say. When you ask a question and instead say, "Do you think you're scared?" then suddenly everything is different. You are opening the conversation and allowing it to be what it is. You're curious. And the more curious you are, the more alive your conversations will be, and the more people will like having them with you. The first person at the party was essentially in a monologue. The second one was letting you know that they wanted the conversation to be a collaborative effort. The best conversations are co-creations. They are mutually steered by both parties, and neither of them knows exactly where it's going to lead. That's the fun part, right? A boring conversation is where both people are uninterested and inflexible. They stand next to one another and take turns telling the other person what they know, while the other person waits for their turn to do the same. Boring, huh? How to build curiosity. Curiosity means connection and authenticity. Unless something is connected to the other person or connected to the present moment, it's not really alive. Curiosity, like the quality of charisma we've already explored, is something you are rather than something you do. The most important thing, then, is to first make the mindset shift and genuinely want to know and connect with people. This is a massive hurdle, but unless you cross that hurdle, your attempts to seem curious will always fall flat and be inauthentic. From there, consider these simple rules for maintaining a frame of curiosity in your conversations. 1. Listen deeply. 2. Never assume. 3. Focus on the person, not the story. Listen deeply. Listening is a profound act. When we listen, we open ourselves receptively to learn something new. We're not just gathering data when we listen, we're suspending ourselves and paying close attention to someone else, their world, their experiences, their system of meaning. We're prepared to be surprised. The golden rule is, listen to understand, not to respond. You've probably been in a conversation with someone before and could feel that they were just waiting for you to stop speaking so they could jump in and argue with you or add their 2 cents. They were listening, yes, but only enough so they could insert themselves into the conversation. It's invalidating, and it quickly turns conversations into competitions, or, as we saw above, parallel monologues. When you sit down to talk to someone, be an alien who has never talked to anyone before. Pretend you know absolutely nothing, and listen attentively for the other person to tell you. Listen for nuance. Even if you think you're familiar with what they're saying, be humble enough to imagine that the way they're expressing it may be completely novel to you. You might catch your brain wandering off and trying to tell its own story about the details it's hearing, pull it back when it does that and remind it to listen to the other person's story about what is happening. That is what you're listening for. Another good rule of thumb is to listen for emotion, not fact. Person A might tell Person B a long list of everything that has bothered them that day, listing a broken-down car, to an irate customer at work, to a mother-in-law who made a mean snipe for no reason. Person B could latch on to one of these details, let's say the broken car, and start to help by suggesting solutions for fixing the car. The problem? They've listened, but not really. Person A is communicating one overall message. I'm stressed and overwhelmed today and need to vent. Person B pays attention to the details, but misses the bigger point. Person B is not listening to the emotion behind all these separate little facts, frustration, annoyance, etc. They're also not hearing the reason Person A is talking to them in the first place, i.e., Person A wants someone to hear them and acknowledge their emotion. Person B could instead say, "Wow, sounds like you've had a day from hell. Let's get a drink and you can tell me all about it." It would then feel like they had truly listened. Good listeners are great at noticing patterns, and they pay attention to things that stand out. They notice when someone keeps mentioning the same phrase or word over and over, for example, and they use that word themselves or paraphrase it when trying to demonstrate that they've heard and understood. They notice body language and speech patterns and infer the overall context of what's being communicated. They're not just listening to the words spoken, but to everything around those words. Assume nothing. This is basically the same as being curious. If you find people boring, it's usually not that they themselves are boring, but rather that the categories you've put them in are too narrow and limited. So you see a teenage boy in front of you and make the knee-jerk assumption that he's probably immature, that he spends too much time gaming, or that he's a little awkward or untidy at home. But if you hold on to this stereotype too tightly, it may stop you from seeing the genuine human being in front of you. That teenage boy may be incredibly mature, self-controlled, creative, sensitive, thoughtful, and unconventional. The only way you will see all that, though, is to drop your assumptions. When you listen to such a boy, then, you're not listening to confirm what you already think of him. When you perceive him without bias, assumptions, and filters, you're also listening on a deep level. You are willing to discover who he is, rather than to come to a lazy conclusion that's based on nothing. After all, wouldn't you want people to approach you in the very same way? It's human to fill in the details. We see a middle-aged woman in tweed carrying a briefcase on a university campus, and we assume she's a lecturer or professor. Chances are she is. But what about all the times she isn't? Our mental shortcuts and assumptions are fine when we are aware that we're using them, but we need to be able to ditch them when faced with a real person, not a stereotype. Another way that assumptions can creep in and spoil connection is when we are too hasty to interpret a situation according to our frame of reference, forgetting about the other person. Someone announces a pregnancy and you say to them, "You must be so excited." But must they be? In being so quick to assume that excitement is the only response to a pregnancy, you've lost sight of the other person and their unique experience. Your goal with listening is not to guess things accurately or come up with some compelling theory or explanation to feed back to the other person. Your goal is simply to be there as a witness to the experience they are sharing. Give yourself this permission and you'll notice how much easier conversations are for you as well. Person, not story. This is an extension of the last rule, which is to focus on the person behind the story and not so much on the story itself. The details are beside the point. What's interesting is how they experience those details. What do the details look like to them in their world from their frame of reference? What does it all mean to them? Imagine a conversation where someone is telling a friend a story where they feel persecuted unfairly at work. If the friend goes into private investigator mode and immediately starts trying to figure out who is really to blame, they've missed the point entirely. It doesn't matter how they make sense of the story or how others would, that's irrelevant. What matters is how the person has experienced the story. A good friend will say something like, "How are you feeling about the whole thing?" Or, "What do you think you want to do now?" Rather than, "Oh, I'm sure you just misunderstood. You're being too sensitive." Conversation is not about finding out who's right. It's about support, connection, and understanding. So instead of having a conversation about whether a colleague was or wasn't rude, you simply focus on the fact that the person in front of you believes they were. Internet forums often have sections devoted to people asking the anonymous public if, in some personal situation, they were being unreasonable or were in the wrong. But this kind of conversation is never satisfying, for obvious reasons. Conflict is never resolved when people find out what is rationally true or reasonable, and someone's hurt feelings don't go away just because everyone else feels like they shouldn't feel that way. The fact is, they do. So instead of focusing on who is right and who is wrong, forget the story and look at the people underneath. How do they feel? Does someone feel guilty, ignored, confused, misunderstood? Never mind what you think of the situation or what anyone else does. What do they think of it? Follow that thread, and it will lead you to richer, more real connections. You go first. Before we close this chapter, let's look at one unexpected way you can show that you're willing to really listen to people. Disclose something about yourself. This may seem counterintuitive, but it's really about emphasizing the reciprocal in reciprocal curiosity. If one person repeatedly feels called on to self-disclose while the other person doesn't, it can feel unbalanced and create weird power dynamics. Especially if someone feels like they're already on the back foot, asking too many questions while you reveal nothing of yourself can actually make the situation worse. Taking the initiative to disclose something real about yourself can be a way to correct this and almost invite the other person to do the same. It creates trust and sets the tone. Take another look at this interaction from the second person at the party. "Man, my back's been killing me, though." "Oh, no. Don't tell me you've got back pain, too. Do you think we're all getting old or something? You're the third person to tell me about back pain this week." Notice the very subtle self-disclosure and how they are creating a sense of shared experience and trust by this little word, we. There is a teeny tiny gesture of vulnerability in there. The self-disclosure, no matter how small, is paired with a question and an invitation for the other person to disclose. It's balanced. Questions are great. Too many questions, without any personal disclosure from you, will feel intrusive and disempowering. The trick with self-disclosure is to use it sparingly, use it wisely, and be sincere. If you don't really know how someone feels, for example, then don't say, "I know how you feel." Put it into practice. In your next conversation, Imagine that you are switching out your normal ears for emotion ears that can only detect emotional content. Without making any assumptions, ask yourself why this person is telling you what they're telling you. There's no need to necessarily act on what you hear with these ears, but practice turning them on in social interactions and notice how different the situation appears to you when you take in this stream of information rather than perceive only the verbal and factual. Summary. Dr. Jack Schafer's friendship formula is as follows. Friendship equals proximity plus frequency plus duration plus intensity. Friendship will develop according to the sum of all these four elements. That means that one element can be relatively weak if another compensates by being extra strong. Building friendships is about fostering increasing closeness, i.e., proximity. Greater frequency also means a stronger chance of friendship developing. The more frequently you engage with someone, the more they feel like part of your world. Friendship takes time to build, so greater duration of time spent together means greater chance of friendship. Finally, it matters how well you're able to satisfy another person's needs during any social interaction. The more you can, the better the chance of striking up a friendship. When making friends, deliberately find ways to increase proximity and the duration, frequency, and intensity of your interactions with people. In that order. Go slow. To create a reality distortion field, you'll need to increase eye contact, be aware of your personal space, and stay present and open-minded in conversations. Charismatic, confident people are physically present without being imposing or threatening, and their eye contact is natural. They do not let judgment, anxiety, or distraction undermine their presence in the moment. The key is to acknowledge people and make them feel important. The biggest impact you make on people does not come from what you say, but from how you are. Maintain reciprocal curiosity and the mindset that you can always learn something new from others. Be fully present, open-minded, and receptive, rather than approaching with bias, judgment, or distractions. Instead of trying to convince others how fascinating you are, find what is fascinating about others. Conversations are co-creations. Genuinely connect to others by listening deeply, focusing on the person and not their story, and never making judgments or assumptions. Listen to understand, not to respond. Listen primarily for emotion, not just fact. One way you can show that you're willing to really listen to people is self-disclosure. This has been Make Friends Easily. How to Charm and Connect in Record Time, written by Patrick King, narrated by Russell Newton. Copyright 2023 by Patrick King. Production copyright by Patrick King.